Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to sit in on this webinar. I'm trying to do a bunch of webinars regarding Office 365, all the various features, and there's a lot there. So there will be presentations and webinars probably weekly, and actually we're going to be starting up a new webinar series, which will be a lunchtime series where it'll be a little different than what we're doing right now in that it'll be specific, showing you how to do things with various applications. So we'll show you how to do some things in Word and in Outlook and in OneNote, all the various Office 365 apps, the to-do list, etc. I usually do record these sessions so that if somebody wants to hear the session again, or if they want to pass it around, we can do that. You can just email me after the session, tell me you want a link to it, and I can send you a link. So today's session is taking Office 365 on the road, and it's mobile for mobile productivity. And one of the things, most of you that are on the line already have Office 365 or you're getting ready to install Office 365. For most of our clients, their first exposure to Office 365 is when we take them from their in-house email and we move it to Office 365. And in that scenario, lots of times people don't even realize what else they have with Office 365 because you're usually using Outlook on your desktop, and that's the extent of what a lot of people do, is just use their email with Office 365. Office 365, though, has a whole bunch of apps that can be very beneficial. You have cloud storage, you have to-do list apps, you have different types of sharing apps. So there's a lot of functionality in Office 365, and I do a kind of an introduction to Office 365 webinar, and I try to do that at least once a month so that new people or even people that have been using Office 365 for a while can get an idea of what all the various functions or all the various modules are in Office 365. We're not going to go through all those today, at least in detail. We are going to touch on all of the apps, pretty much all of the apps in Office 365, but we're going to be looking at it today from the standpoint of using it as from your mobile devices, your phones and your tablets. So our agenda today is we're going to go through, there's two different, with Office 365, there's kind of different versions of applications, so it can get a little confusing. The first, this is just definitions for now. So the first definition would be desktop apps. So your desktop apps are the ones that you're probably most familiar working with already, which is your Outlook, your Word, Excel, etc., that you run on your computer, and a lot of us have been running them for years. Those are called desktop apps, and that's what generally most of us use on a day-to-day basis. We also have web apps with Office 365. So with web apps, you would log into your Office 365 account, and then you can access the web apps. And those are Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. We'll talk about that a little bit. Then we have mobile apps, and mobile apps are apps that you would use on your iPhone or your Android phone or your tablets. And those apps you would go to the App Store in either of those phones or tablets and download, for instance, Word or Excel, and those apps will run on your mobile devices. So those are the mobile apps. And then the last, which is probably the least used, at least from the standpoint of our clients, is Windows 10 apps. So there's a bunch of apps in here that are actually set up or can be set up as Windows 10 apps as well. So if you're in Windows 10, you would go to the Windows 10 App Store and download the app. And there's a few. Planner is one of those. The to-do list is another one. So there's several that you can, and they just run a little differently. You don't have to be in the web to get to those things. We're not going to go through those today. We're going to concentrate on basically the mobile apps. So we'll talk about the web apps. a little bit, and then we'll go into more detail of the mobile apps. And I'll actually demo all of those, both the web apps and the mobile apps. We're going to, as far as the web apps are concerned, we're going to go through that pretty quickly, but then we're going to spend a little bit more time with the mobile apps, and I'll set my phone up on here and you'll be able to see what you can do with the mobile apps. So the web apps. The web apps are, as I said, how you access those is you're going to log into Office 365 through a browser. You can use any browser, Outlook, Internet Explorer, Edge, Chrome, Firefox, any of them. They all pretty much work the same, although there might be little differences between how things display between the browsers. But for the most part, they're the same. And we'll take a look. I have my Office 365 account open, and I'll show you the various apps in there. But the apps that are there are Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, OneDrive, SharePoint, Planner, Teams, the to-do list. Visio, it can also be there, but Visio is an add-on. There are, with your Office 365, pretty much everything we're talking about today is included. There may be some variations depending on the version of Office 365 you have, but there are also some apps that are not included, and if you want to use them, you can purchase them and it's just another add-on monthly fee per user that uses them. And for instance, Visio is one of those. Visio is not an app that is a free part of Office 365. It's a separate application. Not a lot of people use Visio. We use it, and we have a few clients that use it. But if you do, you can get the web version of that as well. There's a function called Groups, which kind of is going away at the moment. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Skype for Business, which is a communications tool, so you can do instant messaging. This is all secure instant messaging. It's voice chatting. It's video conferencing between, as simple as two people all the way up to whole groups of people, and that's included in your Office 365. And also Delve. We're not going to spend a lot of time with Delve today because Delve is really designed more around larger customers, but I'll show it to you. And again, we're not going to get into detail of any of these because we just don't have the time, and I want to concentrate mostly on the actual mobile apps. So with that, I'm going to bring up my, let me just change the screen sharing. All right, just give me a second here. I'm having a little trouble with this, getting this screen to show. Well, it doesn't want to show my background screen. Hold on one second. Well, maybe I won't show that screen. Give me 1 second to straighten this out. Having a little technical difficulty at the moment. Okay, here we go. Okay, sorry about that. So on the screen, what you see is I've logged into Office 365, and the way that you can log in is you basically can go to office.com. We have also set up some other ways for our clients to get in. If you have other methods, you can use those. But the generic way that you can do it is just go to office.com, and then you're going to log in with your basically with your email address and your password. If you don't know what your password is, you can call our office. Usually we can get it for you. So on here, we've got, first of all, Outlook. Okay, so when you first log in, this is the main screen, and there's two different ways of getting to your web apps. One is right here, and then there's something called the App Launcher, which is up in the upper left-hand corner over here. You click that, and that also shows all your apps. The advantage of going this way is if you're in another app, so if we open one of these up, obviously the main menu won't be there. So on all of the apps that you're in, you'll have this little, looks like people call it a waffle, but it's actually the apps launcher. And if you click on that, you will get a list of your applications. So as I was saying, we have Outlook, we have OneDrive. I'm going to go into a couple of these. I won't go into all of them, but I want to go into a couple so you can get a kind of a sense of what they look like when you're using them. And I'll do that for most of the more critical apps, are the ones that most people use. So Outlook is the email and the contacts and everything. OneDrive is the personal file storage, cloud file storage. Then we have Word, we have Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote. SharePoint's a whole basically it's a platform. Then you can do all kinds of things. You can share files, and it would be similar to most companies have an F drive or some type of a shared drive on their server, and those files would go into SharePoint. But that's not the only thing that you would do with SharePoint. You have, for instance, company calendars you can have in there. You can have news groups in there. There's all kinds of things. We do a webinar on SharePoint, and I could do probably 5 webinars just on SharePoint with all the various features of things that you can do. Teams is a relatively new module. Actually, I have a webinar coming up pretty quickly. I don't know if it's next week or the week after on Teams. Yammer, again, Yammer is one of the tools that for most smaller businesses, it's not used. It's a method, what I call it is Facebook for your company. So it's similar to Facebook in that you basically have a profile, and then you can post things, you can post pictures, you can post different types of objects in there, and other people can, kind of subscribe to you or follow you or whatever. It's good for larger organizations because not everyone necessarily knows everyone, and if you have a project that you're trying to do and you need to have somebody that has, I don't know, some engineering expertise or something, you could use Yammer and find that person within your organization. And be able to communicate with them and invite them to the team or whatever. Dynamics, we're not going to get into today. Most of you don't have that. It may show up on your menu because it's probably a marketing ploy. But Dynamics is an accounting program, and you can run it within Office 365. And if you were, then you have a web version of it. Flow is something, again, we're not going to work with today, but pretty much most Office 365 tenants have Flow. Flow is a method of creating basically a flow, so of a process. So maybe you have a document that when you create the document, it has to go to somebody else to be approved, and then it goes somewhere else to be sent out to a group or something. You could create that with Flow. Admin, only if really most of you will not see the admin icon. Security and compliance, that's not really a separate web app. That's how we set up security and compliance within your tenant. Microsoft Planner is another relatively new module that they've added to Office 365 just in the last, I would say, probably 6 months. And that's a little mini project planner. And then the to-do list is exactly what it says. It's an app that Microsoft, this is even newer. This one is probably 2 or 3 months old, and it allows you to create various to-do lists, it's basically designed to interface with the other Office 365 apps. And you actually have more apps. If you click Explore All Your Apps, it'll actually give you a little description of what the apps are and things. So as I said, I'm not going to go through every one of these, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of them, and we'll go through these again when I bring the phone up on the screen. But first of all, the Outlook. So this is this is Outlook like you have in the office. It does, because it's web-based, it does look a little different, but it also looks very similar. So if you have folders that you store your email in, they'll all be over on the left. And when you first go in, you're in your inbox. And you can, for instance, if I want to delete a message, I can delete a message here. So this is kind of what Outlook looks like. If I wanted to read a message, I just click on the message and I can read the body of the message will show up here. You can obviously reply to messages, move them to different folders, drag and drop them to folders, etc. Down in the lower left, just like in your regular Outlook, you can select your other modules. So here's a calendar. And with the calendar, you can actually have up at the top here, you see all these little tabs. Those are all the various calendars that I use. You have what's called people. These are your contacts, and it tries to help you with the contacts. It tells you who you deal with mostly, and you can adjust those or whatever. If you're using your Outlook tasks, this is the tasks. They'll show up on here. So that's what Outlook looks like. It's very similar to what you're using on your desktop, except for the nice thing about this is if you're somewhere where you don't have your computer with you, you can get to a computer and just, as long as you can get onto the internet, you can securely log into this. Nothing comes down to the machine that you're working on. It all stays, in the cloud. So you can access this from anywhere. And that's one of the advantages of the web-based items. Like I said before, because we're in Outlook, I don't have all those buttons now to select. So this is where I would use my app launcher. OneDrive, I will show this quickly. OneDrive is, as I said, it's a file storage. This is kind of designed around being your personal files. So it's just like a folder on your server. You have folders and files, and Word files, any Excel files, whatever they are. You can open them from here. You can edit them. Word. So the web versions of Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote are not the full version. So when you have your desktop version, the desktop versions are always the most robust. They have the most capability. But the web versions keep getting better and better, and they're getting very close to the desktop versions, and literally every month they're tweaking and adding functions that you couldn't do before. So what I can do here is I can go into a blank document, and just like in Word, I have the toolbars across the top. They are laid out a little differently, but they're here. You can insert things, do editing or whatever. Now, a couple things about using Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote in the web. There's a couple things. First of all, you'll notice there's no save button, because when you're using the apps on the web, you don't have to save it. It's saving as you go as you're going along. So there's no more save function. You don't need to have a save. You can do save as if you wanted to save it as a different document. In actuality, with the latest version of Office 2016, which if you have a version of Office 365 that includes Office, then the new versions of Office 2016, if you're editing a file that is stored in the cloud, you'll also notice the save button is gone because it automatically saves even when you're in Outlook 2016. And this is true of Word and Excel as well as PowerPoint and OneNote. All right. The other thing about working with the apps in the cloud, and this is also now coming down to the desktop apps, is that you have the ability to have multiple people working on the same document at the same time, or the same spreadsheet, or the same PowerPoint presentation. So that's functionality that can be very useful for some companies. I actually use it. I'm using it more and more with some of our clients as we're working on, if we're working on, for instance, some type of policies for compliance or something, which I do a lot of work with that. I can have the client as well as myself in the document at the same time, and we can both be editing the document, or it doesn't have to be just two people. You can have 10 people. Although I think after 2 or 3 people, maybe 4, it starts getting a little crazy, but you can do it. So that's what Word looks like. Excel we'll look at quickly just because it's so you can see that it's laid out pretty much the same as your desktop Excel. All your rows and columns for all of you Excel experts. I use Excel, but by no means do I use it a lot. PowerPoint. And same with the other, when you're working on your desktop, it will actually show the last documents, in this case, the last PowerPoint presentations that you're working on. You can just click here and open that presentation. The one thing that they've added or it's being added right now is that this list of recent documents is going to carry forward no matter whether you've worked on your document on, in the web here or in your desktop app, or if you've worked on it on your mobile device. All of those will be able to see the recent documents. So if you're at the office and you're working on a document and you close it up or you leave it open or whatever, and you leave and go home and you pick up your tablet and you want to work on this document, it would show up in the recent list on the tablet as well. So that's kind of what they look like. Again, I'm going to spend a little bit more time with the mobile stuff. But here's SharePoint is hard to describe. When I log into SharePoint here, this is, as I said, it's kind of like a whiteboard. So what my SharePoint looks like is not going to be what anybody else's SharePoint looks like, or what our company's SharePoint looks like won't be like anybody else's. Basically, SharePoint is a website that you can design. It's an internal website, and you have multiple sites, and it's designed around the stuff that you need. So if we go into this site here, for instance, I'm just showing you this so when we go back to the mobile device, you can see that we can get into the SharePoint and things. So in my SharePoint site, we have on the left, we have our client documents. If I click here, these are all shared amongst ourselves internally. We can obviously put security and all that stuff on the folders or the files. So we have different types of documents. They've just recently added, and I added it into our SharePoint site. We have the ability to have, if you want to follow some subject in Twitter, for instance, some people on the line are in the healthcare, for instance, you can go in and follow healthcare as a keyword in Twitter, and the articles will show up here as people post them. I've had mine set so it displays 3 at a time, and I actually have 2 feeds. This column that's in black is one feed. and the column over here on the right that's in white is another feed. So you can do different things with Twitter if you're familiar with that. You can have notebooks in here. You can have, like I said, calendars. You can do all different types of things in SharePoint. Teams. Teams is something relatively new that's been added, and what Teams are for is it kind of, I guess the best definition of Teams is that it takes all of the, or a lot of the Office 365 functions and puts them into one little container that a specific team would be working on. So maybe you have an accounting team, or you have an engineering team, or you have a nursing team. When you create that team, it creates their own little container in Office 365, and that container can contain files. So the files would be just like if you had them in SharePoint, the files would be here. But these are only accessible to that team. And teams can be private, so only people that are in that team, and they have to be invited to be able to be in that team, or they can be public. And public doesn't mean that everybody has access to it. It just means that if it's public, others can see it. So maybe you have a team on safety. Somebody could see the team and say, hey, I'd like to join that team. And they can request to be added to the team, and then the team owner gets the request, and he can approve them, and now they're in there. But you can have files, you can have notebooks in there, OneNote notebooks. But the basic of what teams generally work on is this idea of chat. So this is a conversation. So a lot of the younger people especially pick this stuff up and really like Teams because it gives them the ability to have persistent chat. So for instance, here Olivia had made some suggestions and she included a document in her message. I could reply to it from here. If somebody else has replied, like here's a few things that I've put in here, and you can add little GIFs, a little animated stuff. But I've included some documents for people to review. We've actually have a planner. This is a link to the planner. So there's all kinds of things you can do with Teams. Very, very useful app. And I'm just showing it here so that we can look at it more when we're on the mobile, which we're going to switch to in just a second. And then we have to-do list, which is, as I said, it's basically a to-do list. You can have multiple lists, and it works out of a function called My Day, which should refresh here in a second because there we go. So here's the tasks that I have for today, and I've already clicked off a few. I use a lot just to remind myself that I want to read this article or do whatever. So that's on here. And on the left, you can have multiple lists for different things. All right, so that's kind of what the web version looks like of these apps. Let me just switch back here to a different screen. Okay. Just rearrange a couple things. So those are what the web apps look like. When we go to the mobile apps, they're very similar in that on the mobile apps we have Outlook, we have Word, we have Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, OneDrive, SharePoint, Planner, Teams, To-Do, Groups, Skype for Business, and Delve. So if you notice, it's very similar to what you have in the web apps. Some of these items, for instance, Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you have desktop versions of these apps. But some of these apps don't have desktop versions. So if you look at, for instance, SharePoint, there's not really a desktop version of SharePoint. You basically go to the web and you access your files or whatever, and you can access it through mobile, but there's not really a desktop version. Teams, there's a Windows 10 version. To-do list, there's a Windows 10 version. So some of them actually have desktop apps, but not all of them. Some of them you have to go to the web, and if you have to go to the web, most all of those would have uh, mobile apps as well. So some of the advantages of using mobile apps are, first of all, you can access these things from anywhere. So when you have, for instance, your email, I think we're all familiar with that. Everybody, mostly everyone, gets their email on their phone, and you can appreciate that you can, anytime, anywhere, you can reply to emails and create emails. You can accept invitations to meetings. You can create meetings. All those things. So it's great to be able to do that, and you can do it anywhere on your phone or your tablet. The other thing is that these mobile apps ride across pretty much any mobile platform. So iOS, which is Apple, so the iPhones, the iPads, etc. Android, all the various Android devices, and also Windows Mobile, which pretty much nobody uses, but it is supported by Windows Mobile. And as I said, it's both phones and tablets. In some cases, the app, and this is true of any apps, sometimes when you go into your phone, the app looks one way, but when you have a mobile, like a tablet or something, because the screen is a little bit bigger, the application developer may tweak it a bit so that it maybe displays a little bit more if you're on a larger screen, etc. And that's true of the Windows apps too. Sometimes you'll see that. With the mobile devices, not only can you have the apps, but you can also remember that you have browsers on the phone, so you could browse and you can log into Office 365 and have access without having the apps on your phone. And it will actually, with a lot of the apps, they'll actually they'll lay themselves out correctly for the phone. The other thing I wanted to mention, that this is all secure stuff. In fact, it has to be, there's a bunch of parameters that companies can set on the devices or on the services so that they can protect their data. That's for a whole different discussion, but just be aware that if you're in management at one of these companies and you like to be able to use these things, that there is security that can be set to allow, for instance, maybe not everyone can access the mobile apps, or they can't access the web apps or whatever. So there's different things there's different settings you can use, and you can do it by groups or by individuals. So there's a bunch of security you can put on there. Okay, so let me just get my phone set up for this. Okay, let me get the phone on the screen. Get rid of some of the background noise there. All right, so this is my phone, and if I remember to push the right buttons instead of using my keyboard, use the phone, I think we'll be good. So on the phone, I put my apps in different folders. So first of all, I have a folder up to the top here called Office, and these are the basic Office apps. So Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and OneNote. So if I go, for instance, we'll start with Word. If I go into Word, again, I see the most recent file list. I can open up any one of these files. I'm going to go ahead and open this file. It doesn't display well on the way that I'm doing this, but on my phone it's as clear as day, and I can actually edit this. I can actually I can print it if I have this, if everything set up correctly. I could save it as another file name if I wanted to. So it's very powerful. Now I wouldn't, one thing I would say here is I don't think that in any of these cases, I would want to use a phone to, for instance, create a huge document. It isn't the right platform. But if I'm somewhere and I needed to get some information off of a document, and I do this a lot when I visit clients, we're talking about something and I want to take a look at what, something in the document is, so I can answer a question or something, I can just go to my phone and open it up and get the information from there. And if maybe while we're talking we make a change to that document, I can make it right on there. That's where it's very useful. I don't think it's useful to say we're going to create a book on your phone. But you could certainly be using the phone to edit the chapters, or you could write a chapter and add it to your regular document later on or whatever. So we can add new documents here if we wanted. We can open, these are my most recent, but if I click on open, it'll bring up all the various locations where I save files. And one thing I wanted to show here is the little cloud, the pictures that look like clouds there, those are OneDrive folders. And if you notice, I'm able to connect to multiple Office 365 accounts. So I have a personal one, I have actually two personal ones, and then I have the business one, and then I have my SharePoint. So I can access files from any of those locations on my phone. I cannot, generally speaking, access files that might be on my server at the office. That's one of the advantages of using things in the cloud. If there's any techies on the phone, I know we can get into files at the office too, but it's a lot more complicated than going through this way. So that's what Word looks like. Excel, again, we're not going to spend a lot of time here. I just want to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. So that's what, so if I go into an Excel spreadsheet, like I say, I'll put in a blank one, hold on. Now I have the Excel spreadsheet and I can scroll around. Again, I can edit it, I can print it, I can do whatever I have permissions to do. Then we have PowerPoint. If Office 365 puts out something new, it'll highlight up on the screen there. If they do an update or add something, in this case to PowerPoint, it'll tell you what has changed. I think this might be the presentation where now this is a previous one. So, I can go to the presentation. I can actually, up at the top here, where the little, looks like a movie screen at the very top, that would play the presentation. So what you could do with this is if you have a phone and you have, for instance, a TV screen or a projector that you can connect to either Bluetooth or wireless or whatever with your phone, you don't even need to bring a laptop if you're going to do a presentation anymore. You can take your phone and actually connect it to the projector or connect it to the large screen and actually run this presentation right from the phone. So that can be useful as well. Or if you're going to, like I've done this before where I've been out, I've flown somewhere to do a presentation or have a meeting or something, and I want to kind of update the slides before I actually do, for this specific customer, I can actually just update the slides using my phone, but then when I go to the location, I probably use my laptop to do the presentation, and the updated slides are, already on there. So it can be useful. And then OneNote. For those of you that use OneNote, you'll be kind of familiar with these. These are all the various notebooks that I have opened on my phone. I have more notebooks than this, but these are the ones that I generally work with, some of them on a daily basis on my phone. So meeting notes is when I have this tab for scheduling meetings and doing the agendas and stuff like that. this could be useful also because, for instance, yesterday I was at a meeting and I had my laptop with me, but I had already shut it down. And after the meeting, we were talking about. I was talking with a couple of the managers, and some things came up that I wanted to write in my notes for that meeting. So I opened up the phone and actually went to the meeting and this isn't the one, but I can just go down and put, add notes or whatever into the meeting. So if you use Outlook, OneNote, this is a great tool. If you don't use OneNote, I would highly suggest you try it out because it's probably the coolest app that Microsoft ever created that a lot of people are not familiar with. One thing I also wanted to show was the Outlook. So if I click Outlook here, it takes me into my inbox, and these are some new messages. And again, I can open them. This is the second one down is a meeting invite, which I'm going to RSVP to later. But we have, so that's your inbox. And then, of course, for those of you that are not aware, if you're using Office 365, and even if you're not, with Office 2016, they're moving to a function or a feature set called a focused inbox, which is what is already on the mobile devices, and it's also in Office 2016 now. And basically what that does, you only have one inbox, but what it does is the focused inbox is it tries to determine messages. Either if you've sent a message out and somebody replies back, it's going to go into focus. But it also looks at it and says, geez, you send a lot of messages to these particular people. So when messages come in from those people, they'll go right into the focused. But we also all get a bunch of emails, probably from mailing lists, from things that we've joined or whatever, and it will determine that over a period of time, and it will just put it in this other tab called Other. And these are all, it's not that they're junk, it's just that they're not necessarily as important as the stuff that we want in our focus. it's just a way to kind of keep your inbox, trying to keep it cleaner. For some of us that get lots of email messages, that can be very helpful. I get like 600 a day, and it's hard to, a lot of those are coming from servers, a lot of them are coming from, Microsoft or whatever, and I don't need those, staring me in the face, so they go into Other. And you can kind of tell it, I want this to be in focused or I want this to be in Other. But also at the bottom, you have your calendar. There's a couple different displays. I have it on a 3-day display, but you can slide. And again, I can add calendar events from here. I can do meeting invites from here. I can accept meeting invites, all kinds of the stuff that you would normally do. Files, if I click on the Files button, oops, yes, I hit it too many times. If I click on the Files button, maybe Files doesn't want to work today. Yeah, maybe we'll skip Files. But Files, what it's supposed to do is it just opens up a list of files that you worked on, and you can attach them to emails. So if you're writing an email in here and you have a file up in, for instance, OneDrive or in SharePoint, you can either attach a link to that file, which is actually becoming the more preferred method, especially if you're emailing amongst your own company. Or you can actually attach the file, which is the traditional way of doing it. So you can do that from there. Boy, my Outlook is not working well at the moment. I think I got to restart the phone. But the other button is the People button, and that's your contacts. So that's just the same contacts you have in your Outlook on the desktop and with Outlook in the web or whatever. All of your contacts go through. That can also be useful. So you're on the road somewhere and you need to have somebody's phone number. If you use Outlook on your mobile device, you'll be able to have access to that. One thing about this, a lot of people I notice when you get Office 365 and they they set up their getting a call. They set up their native email app on the computer, and that it works. I mean, you can do your email and stuff, and it will sometimes sync your contacts and things. But if you could go to the App Store and download Outlook for your device, then you'll have the full Outlook, which will have your calendar, all of that, all in one spot. It can be very useful. The other item that I wanted to show you was to-do list. We looked at the to-do list that was on the phone before. I mean, on the web app. This is the same. This is my day. Typically, to-do list, actually, most people would run it from their phone as opposed to a desktop. This is one of those apps that you would probably use more on your phone. So all of the lists that you saw on my when we were in the web all show up here. Okay, so I have an SSGI list. I have, just basically different lists of things, and you can create whatever kind of list that you want. So that's on there. We also have, remember we were talking about OneDrive, where I could store my personal files. So if I hit the OneDrive button here, it's going to connect me to my OneDrive. Again, if I have multiple Office 365 accounts, which I realize most people probably won't, but they might. Some people actually have a personal OneDrive account. You can get OneDrive for free for personal. So if you had that and you also have your own, you have business OneDrive, you can access both of them. But here are all the folders in my OneDrive, and if I click on a folder, and I got files in there, and I can click on the file, open the file, edit the file, etc. So that's what OneDrive looks like. SharePoint, again, that's where a lot of different things go on in SharePoint. So these are all the various sites that we have set up both in our own Office 365 plus some of our clients. And if I go into one of our own, it shows the most recent activity, first of all. But if I go to site navigation, this shows me, if you remember when we were in SharePoint, we had the client documents folder, and here's where the client documents, and here's all the clients. And if I open one, I can get into the other folders or files. So that's SharePoint. And again, if you remember that Twitter feed in SharePoint, I could get to that as well. I'm not going to go through there right now, but you can get to any of those, any module. So if I had a calendar in there or a survey, you can do whatever with the mobile device. You can pretty much do whatever you need to do. There are some items that you can't do, but for the most part, you can do pretty much everything. Planner, that's that little small project planner that I was talking about. So when you first open it up, it shows you all the various projects, plans that you've created. And if I go to this particular project plan, this is the buckets in the project plan. And I'm using words that may or may not matter to you at the moment, or you may not realize what they mean. But I did recently do a planner webinar, and I'll be doing another one a few weeks out. But these are buckets of things in my project plan. So these are all check boxes. If I finished this review, I could highlight it and it will check it off. I could add tasks there, etc. I could assign tasks to other people on the project team. Oops, wrong button. And we talked about teams. So this is a feed. So what the feed is if I'm on multiple teams and there's activity going on, it kind of just brings it all into this one thing called a feed. But if I go down the bottom here and click on teams, these are the teams. So I don't know if you remember, we had this document management project going on, or a team, I should say. And these were the conversations, I think at the top. Yeah, this is where Olivia had the document in there. So again, from here, if I wanted to reply to something, I would just hit reply. So it can be very useful. Teams can be very useful, and especially if you're using mobile, it can be really useful. Let's see. The other was the last thing I was going to show you in here was Skype for Business. So for those of you who use Skype already, you might be using it on your desktops. Uh, if you are using Skype for Business, you can get it. It'll run on your phone as well. So it shows meetings and stuff when you first go in, and it shows the most recent conversations you've had with people. But if you go, you can actually go to the people area here. And so, for instance, if I wanted to start chatting with Ray right now, I would just tap on his icon there, and I could talk to him. What I'm showing here is just the internal people, but you also can have external people as long as you know their Skype address. So that's kind of the items on the phone itself. So let me get rid of that. Okay. So we went through a lot of stuff pretty quickly, but the goal, the object of what I wanted to try to accomplish today, or the goal of what I wanted to accomplish, was to kind of give everyone an idea of that if you're using Office 365, or if you're thinking about it, or whatever, to realize that it's much more than just your email. Office 365, what I would suggest is, if you haven't had an exposure to all the different things in Office 365, that you keep your eye out for the next introduction to Office 365 webinar that I do, because in that one I go through, I briefly touch on mobile there, but I spend more time, for instance, with SharePoint and with Teams, just to give people a little bit more a better idea of what all these different modules are. Not all the modules are for everyone by any means. Maybe some people won't find Teams useful. You certainly don't have to use it, but I think where Teams starts getting useful is realistically, if you start using SharePoint and you start using something like a Skype for Business in your, amongst yourselves in your business, what happens is you kind of quickly find out, boy, it'd be nice to be able to tie these things together, and that's where Teams comes in. If you just try to go to Teams initially, it can be done, but it's like, to me, it's like just the next logical step once you start using some of the other modules that are in Office 365. So I wanted to stop. I've been doing a lot of talking. I wanted to stop and see if there's any questions. Again, you can either, if you have a device with a microphone and stuff, you can just ask your question, or you can put it in the chat dialogue on your GoToMeeting component on your screen. While we're waiting for somebody, if anybody needs to think of a question, our next schedule is actually, it's next week that we're doing the Microsoft Teams. There'll be an email going out either over the weekend or on Monday, but that's scheduled for 3:15. And then the following week is OneDrive for Business. And then the week after that, it's going to be Microsoft Forms, which we haven't talked about today. This is a brand new module that has been added to Office 365. I believe all different versions have Microsoft Forms. I'd have to check that. I'm not positive. But that's a new tool that they've added to Office 365, which allows you to create surveys or polls. It was really designed around schools, so they could actually, or educational, I should say, so that they could actually create quizzes and things like that. So for instance, I can create a form, and you'll see these coming from me. I'll create a form, and you'll get a form from me, and you can. It'll ask some questions or whatever, and you can fill it out, and it gets sent back, and it actually kind of takes all of the summary of all of the forms that come back and gives you some like reporting on it. It's pretty useful. It's not quite as powerful as some of the other survey applications that are out in the market right now, but it's still a pretty powerful app. So did anybody come up with any questions on the mobile stuff? Okay, well, if that's the case, I'll let everybody get back to work. And again, thanks for coming, setting in on this session. And hopefully you found that that Office 365 mobile applications may have some value to you and to your company. With that, let's have a great day. It looks like the sun is out and it's at least not snowing for now. Hopefully it stays that way for many days. So with that, have a great weekend, and hopefully you can attend one of our other recordings. I'm sorry, one of our other sessions. Thanks.